So I know I'm not the first person to touch on this topic, but I still think it's worthy to mention the fact that Elon Musk just bought a $3 billion stake worth in Twitter. And so that amounts to a 9.2% stake in the company at 73.5 million shares. And so the backdrop of this is that, Musk, as it says down here, he's been raising questions about the ability to communicate freely on Twitter, tweeting last month about free speech and the social media platform. Free speech is essential to a functioning democracy. Do you believe that Twitter rigorously adheres to this principle? He tweeted in a rhetorical sort of question. And of course, let's be honest with ourselves. The answer is no. Twitter's been banning massive amounts of people from their platform for quite a long time. They're actively involved in censorship. They've actively inserted themselves into the business of managing what sort of discourse is acceptable in the public forum. And that's really not the place of a corporation. It's not the place of corporate governance. Now, it could be argued that Twitter is a private platform and therefore private sort of property in a sense, and that they can determine what people are allowed and what they're not allowed to say on their platform. And there's an argument to that, and I would somewhat agree to the point where I think we have a changing world and a changing nature of how social media is used. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I think what you're saying would be correct. But I think in the context of how important platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and others have become in the public discourse, a lot of people actually communicate more on social media than they do verbally with others at this point in time. And that was especially exacerbated with how long people were left indoors during the pandemic. And so this is a big problem. It genuinely is. And so one of the things I like about this is that Musk, he might be buying this so he can do something about that. Now, he was giving serious thought about creating a new social media platform, which has been done before. There's a large new tech ecosystem, but if you go on there, you're not going to get a following because the people just aren't there. Most people aren't on those. That's just the reality. You're not going to get the same following on new tech that you will on YouTube or on Twitter or on Facebook or Instagram or any of the standard social media platforms because the vast majority of people are still on there. So it could be what he's considering doing. And this is what, of course, as they describe, a lot of Trump supporters want him to do. To reinstate the former president's Twitter account, but not just that, but what that really would represent. If Elon Musk gets to be a large enough of a voting bloc within the shares, within the proxy vote of the company, and now he's going to need more than 9.2% to really make a difference in proxy voting. But if you got enough, if you say bought 51% or bought 30-some 40-some percent and linked up with maybe several other shareholders who had a similar view, they could force in a new CEO who could bring about reforms that would restore freedom of speech on Twitter. Speculation. It's a possibility, and ultimately that's what the excitement's about. And that's why the stock has actually gone up 27% today. And a further so far of 3.6% in after hours, which is a pretty significant spike, as you can see here. But only getting it up to the level that it was at, actually, in November. Ultimately, the Twitter stock, I would still not recommend it. Maybe for some kind of short-term trade, I guess. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, it says, oh, performance outlook up in the. It estimates it up in the short term and midterm, and it says it has a bullish pattern and such and such. But I, Twitter stock has been an underperformer for a long time. If you look at 2013, really, it's kind of in the same range now. I mean, it is in the same range now that it was, within the first couple of years after IPO. So it's really it's really a pretty terrible stock actually, still. But nonetheless, as you can see, there's a huge base of public excitement about this. So there's a lot of speculation. And so what a lot of the speculation is, of course, coming from is the fact that he's been sort of laying down hints that or not even really hints. I mean, he's been basically outright stating that he would like to see the way Twitter works fundamentally changed. And so, for an example of this would be on March 25th, him tweeting out an informal poll asking his followers if Twitter had adhered to the principle that freedom of speech is essential to a functioning democracy. Which is, I believe, something they've put out in a decent amount of official literature from the company. And so, of the roughly 2 million respondents to the poll, 70.4% voted no. Which, of course, is obvious. It should have been 100% of the people voting no. Because I think that it's quite clear that Twitter bans people that they don't like and that they don't politically agree with. And you see this in the liberal use of hate speech policies, which is an intentionally vague term. It can mean actually really any sort of speech that you personally find offensive or you personally can interpret as having malice behind it. It's really awfully vague, and it's designed to be able to be interpreted in a variety of ways that can really deem a variety of not hateful statements as such. So the very concept of hate speech is kept intentionally vague so as to be used as a club with which to hit speech. And so the question is, and Marjorie Taylor Greene asks it perfectly, will the new majority shareholder return freedom of speech to Twitter? Well, and that is the golden question. Elon Musk has 9% of Twitter. We're excited about that. We're buying Twitter stock, right? But will that actually translate to what people hope for? Maybe. It's hard to say at this point. If he really wants to do much, he would have to buy more, which he's capable of doing. Total market cap's only 40 billion of all outstanding shares, and if we look up Elon Musk total wealth, yeah, so he has a net worth of 275 billion. Now, of course, 288 billion apparently. So obviously most of that, or a very small percentage of that, is liquid funds. Looking at the way it fluctuates over time, and just the fact that, biggest asset, Tesla equity. I was about to say that I would think most of his wealth is Tesla stock. And it is his biggest asset, or at least his largest asset. A plurality of his wealth is in Tesla stock. So I'm not sure if he could easily muster the funds to buy out the company completely. Which, some people have speculated upon that, he could buy out the whole company. But he doesn't really need to do that. He would only really need to buy a good enough proportion to make a difference. A large enough portion that he can sway proxy vote elections. And that's the number one thing that we're looking at here. I don't see what he would have bought it for other than that, unless he just wanted to do some stupid, just pump up the stock for a quick trade or something like that. Buy in at 37, say, hey guys, I'm buying 9%. And the stock rockets up to $50 and then you sell off. I mean, it's either that or he's planning on doing something via proxy voting. I don't see what else his intention would be other than those two options. But whether that actually translates in the short or the long run to any discernible change in censorship laws on Twitter or social media broadly, I think we're going to have to take a wait and see approach on when it comes to that one.